After waking up and realizing that my younger brother is the villain, I glanced at the cold-looking young boy beside me, rubbed my hands, and started making a wish. Brother, in the future, I want a big villa. Oh, and a whole bunch of beautiful clothes and bags. And also, I want to have a Michelin-starred meal. My younger brother was shocked. Just then, a bunch of bullet comments flashed before my eyes. I'm dying of laughter. The female lead is treating the villain like a turtle in a wishing pool. Ha 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 ha. Who exactly is the villain? Look how scared the villain is by the female lead. But don't you think the villain will really be rich in the future? Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. After our parents died in a car accident, my younger brother and I were living in my uncle's house. At first, in front of others, my aunt was quite nice to us. But when I was 18, probably after the inheritance was used up, she took my 11-year-old brother to the amusement park. After coaxing him by saying she would buy him ice cream, she never came back. Fortunately, after I realized something was wrong and called the police, we managed to find him in time. But this completely broke off our relationship. When I took Thomas and left the Walker family, my aunt crossed her arms and leaned against the door. Her previous warmth was gone, and her triangular eyes showed a bit of mockery. Is this your home? You can't expect me to keep supporting you. I ignored her words and led Thomas out step by step. Damn it. Sure enough, everything in this world is fake, and only poverty is real. But just then, a bunch of subtitles suddenly flashed before my eyes. Is this what the villain was like when he was a child? He was so withdrawn even then. If he hadn't foolishly followed my aunt to the amusement park, this wouldn't have happened. Sister, don't be nice to this ungrateful younger brother. He's really heartless. The relationship between the villain and the sister is rather cold. Otherwise, he wouldn't regret it until after his sister died. Me? What are these things? I was stunned for a moment. Without paying attention, I crashed into the glass door with a dong sound, and my eyes went black. The next moment, a whole bunch of chaotic memories suddenly welled up in my mind. My blood flowed quickly in my body and rushed to my head. It turned out that I'm the cannon fodder sister in a sweet romance novel. I don't have many scenes, and my younger brother is the villain in the novel. He lived a lonely life since childhood and depended on his sister. In the future, he would fight with the male lead for the female lead and finally end up going bankrupt and dying a tragic death. Wait a minute. I keenly caught a key point. My younger brother will be extremely wealthy in the future and be on par with the male lead who comes from a wealthy family. Is this for real? Am I hallucinating because I'm so poor? I pursed my lips and stared at Thomas, sizing him up. He was looking at me too. His little face was tense, showing no extra expression. But if you observed carefully, you could see the worry in his eyes. Due to malnutrition, he wasn't tall and was as thin as a bamboo pole, but his face was quite good-looking. While I was lost in my thoughts, suddenly my clothes were tugged. I came back to my senses and saw that it was Thomas who hadn't said a word all along, probably because he grew up in others' house. He was different from other children, being cold and withdrawn. Moreover, since I had been living in the school dormitory for a long time and didn't often go back to my aunt's house, and even when I did go back and asked him a few questions, he remained silent. Although we were sisters and brothers, in fact, we weren't very familiar with each other. What's wrong? I thought for a while and asked. I suddenly remembered what those subtitles said. Could it be that now that I took him away, he would blame me for making him leave the comfortable place where he had enough to eat and wear? Before this thought settled, I saw Thomas, who was always withdrawn, lower his eyelashes as if struggling with something. His long and curled eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. After a long while, I suddenly heard him say, "I'm sorry." After a pause, he added, "I shouldn't have been greedy and gone to the amusement park with my aunt." His voice was very low, carrying the embarrassment of a broken expectation. I was stunned. I suddenly remembered that when we found him with the police uncle at the amusement park, Thomas had been staring intently at a little boy who was being held by his parents, and envy showed in his lonely eyes. "It's not your fault. My aunt is full of tricks." I let out a sigh and comforted him. Which child doesn't like going to the amusement park? If I were his age, I would have fallen for it too. Hearing this, Thomas raised his eyes. Some emotion seemed to appear in his eyes, but he quickly lowered his head and gave a muffled, "All right. Let's go." "Okay." I quickly adjusted my mood and calculated the money I had left. Fortunately, after graduating from high school, I had earned $7,000 or $8,000 from working, and I spent $1,000 on renting a house. Calculated like this, it would be okay for a while. After moving into the rented house, we tidied up for a whole night and were so tired that we fell asleep as soon as we lay down. The next morning, I originally planned to go buy some groceries alone, but after washing up, I unexpectedly found that Thomas had already gotten up and was curled up on the shabby little sofa. The morning sunlight shone through the old glass window and landed on his little face with dark circles under his eyes. When he saw that I was about to go out with my bag, Thomas, who had been dazed, stood up immediately. His dark eyes stared at me, and his fingers unconsciously rubbed the edge of his pants. His lips moved, but he didn't say anything. Seeing the panic in his eyes, my heart tightened. In an instant, I understood his uneasiness. He was afraid that I would abandon him too. The subtitles that had appeared yesterday showed up again. Hiss. The little villain looks kind of pitiful, doesn't he? What's there to sympathize with? The villain is probably pretending. Is he afraid that the only person who can take care of him will run away? He's been psychologically twisted since childhood. Otherwise, how could he become so crazy in the future? If I were his sister, I would have thrown him away long ago. Don't be too unreasonable. The villain is just withdrawn, but he has never harmed his sister. Okay. The bullet comments were in a mess, and it made my eyes ache from looking at them. Just as I was hesitating, Thomas thought I was really going to leave. The light in his eyes dimmed little by little. His hands hanging by his side clenched tightly, and the color drained from his lips. Just as he turned around and was about to go back to his room, he suddenly heard me say, "I'm going to buy groceries. Do you want to come?" My words just fell. The young boy immediately turned his head, meeting my smiling eyes. His eyes trembled violently, and he replied in a slightly hasty tone, "Yes." I nodded. What bad intentions could a simple-minded little kid who wanted to go to the vegetable market have? I took Thomas to the noisy vegetable market. He had never been there before and was obviously not used to such a noisy environment. His brows were furrowed tightly. I didn't expect him to do anything. I just asked him to carry some things for me. But the bullet comments thought differently. Why is the villain so funny? Does he really think he's a rich second generation? He makes his sister do everything. That delicate look of his really makes me angry. What do you want? The villain has already had a tough life. As his sister, isn't it right to be nice to him? I ignored the bullet comments that were arguing again and walked up to the vegetable stall. I picked a small cauliflower and asked, "Auntie, how much is this?" $6.80. I bargained and got it for $6.50. And I even got a scallion. Thomas stared at me chattering on and was stunned for a moment. Seeing this, I thought he thought it was embarrassing. I hesitated, wanting to explain something, but then I decided not to say anything until we went to buy meat. The meat vendor was a young girl, and she was very quick. "Beauty, it's $28. I was about to pay and leave when I suddenly heard the young boy beside me say awkwardly, "Sister, can you give us a discount? How about $27? Hearing this voice, I was stunned and turned to look at him. I saw Thomas with a serious face, calmly bargaining, but his ears were as red as blood. What's this? Is the villain learning on the spot? Making a small bargain? Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. The sister looks incredibly surprised. Ha ha ha. Who bargains with such a serious face? People who don't know would think you're in a meeting. Yeah. I was both amused and touched. But Thomas obviously didn't think so. He was dead serious. The young girl selling meat reacted and laughed heartily. Sure, little guy. Seeing that the bargain was successful, Thomas unconsciously looked up at me. There was a bright light in his dark eyes. I couldn't help but pinch his face. TSK. He's quite cute. After that, we also bought shrimp, eggs, and some seasonings and daily necessities. These odds and ends didn't seem expensive, but when calculated together, we spent a lot of money. In a few days, I'm going to go to a local university. I not only have to save the tuition fees but also leave living expenses for Thomas. Haha, this life is getting more and more exciting. After buying the groceries, on the way home, I bought 2 steamed buns casually from a breakfast shop on the side of the road. One for Thomas and one for me. We made do with them for breakfast. He didn't mind and gnawed on the steamed bun with relish. But a half-grown boy can eat a lot. At noon, Thomas was already starving, but he was too embarrassed to say anything and just stared at me eagerly. Seeing this, I rolled up my sleeves, thinking of something. I smiled and said, "Brother, I'll make 7 dishes and 1 soup for you." Thomas swallowed his saliva. Really? Me? Of course. So in the following time, he watched as I took out a shrimp, stir-fried it with sliced green peppers. When it was cooked, I scooped it out and said with satisfaction, "Okay, the shrimp-flavored stir-fried green peppers are ready." Then I put the shrimp back. Didn't even wash the pan. Directly turned on the fire. Put the washed quail eggs in. Stir-fried them together with the shrimp. Poured in some soy sauce and a little salt. And fried the eggs until they were golden. The stir-fried shrimp and quail eggs are ready. After it was out of the pot, I put the shrimp back again. Added tofu. The shrimp-flavored tofu and mushroom soup. Steamed eggs with shrimp oil. Stir-fried eggplant with shrimp heads. Fried shrimp shells. Shrimp-flavored stir-fried green peppers. Stir-fried shrimp and quail eggs. Plain noodles with shrimp foam. And shrimp yolk pancakes were all ready. Thomas stared at the table full of dishes in disbelief. The shrimp. I might as well have died in the vegetable market. The villain looks dumbfounded. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. I want to ask, who's going to wash the dishes? I patted his shoulder earnestly. Did you learn it? When I go to school, you have to take good care of yourself and eat enough at home. Thomas was stunned. It took him a long time to say, "Mm." I nodded in satisfaction but didn't notice that the young boy quietly lowered his eyes and clenched his fists secretly. Probably because we only had each other. The relationship between me and Thomas got much closer. For several days in a row, I made a whole meal of shrimp and then a whole meal of streaky pork. Although Thomas was silent, he would silently take on the task of washing the dishes after I finished cooking. But, occasionally, he would euphemistically mention, "Sister, there are only 2 of us. 2 dishes are enough." Me? Oh, but the rich second-generation male lead has 10 dishes for a meal. as the villain. My younger brother should have that too. One night, after dinner, a small figure stood in front of the kitchen counter, washing the dishes with his back to me. The sound of the running water kept coming. I leaned on the sofa and watched the bullet comments flashing in front of me. Why do I think the villain is quite sensible? He even helps his sister wash the dishes. It's really too poor. The mental state of the villain's sister is so stable. Ha 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 ha. Me? No. Some people seem stable, but they're actually going crazy. I stared at Thomas's back, suddenly thinking of something. After he finished washing the dishes, I waved to him. Brother, come here. Thomas didn't understand why, but he obediently walked over. When he came closer, I rubbed my hands and started making a wish. Brother, in the future, I want a big villa. Oh, and a whole bunch of beautiful clothes and bags. And also, I want to have a Michelin-starred meal. My younger brother was shocked. Even the bullet comments were stunned for a moment. And then they started spamming. I'm dying of laughter. The female lead is treating the villain like a turtle in a wishing pool. Ha 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 ha. Who exactly is the villain? Look how the female lead scared the villain into making a funny face. But don't you think the villain will really be rich in the future? I could see Thomas's confusion, and I knew that he, being so young, didn't understand these things. But it didn't matter. Just think of me as talking nonsense. But what I didn't know was that night, Thomas went back to his room and seriously wrote down in a small notebook my wishes. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. On the day of the school opening, I first sent Thomas to primary school and then went to the university to register. Fortunately, the university I applied to wasn't too far from where I lived. It only took me more than half an hour to get there by public bicycle, and it only cost me $1.50 within half an hour. What a bargain! I left $300 as living expenses for Thomas and told him to solve his breakfast and lunch by himself. If I had evening classes, he didn't have to wait for me for dinner. At school, I could fill myself up with a bowl of rice, shredded potatoes, and free soup. Day by day passed. Thomas didn't cause any trouble, and I gradually felt at ease. During my spare time, I worked as a tutor to earn money, but I didn't expect that. It was a Wednesday. After finishing my last specialized course, I was about to pick up my bag and go to the cafeteria to pack sweet and sour spare ribs to take home. But when I opened my phone, I suddenly saw a missed call from Thomas's teacher. My heart trembled, and I immediately called back. The moment the call connected, a middle-aged woman's voice came from the other end. Hello. Who are you? I quickly said, I'm Thomas's sister. Is there anything wrong? It was noisy over there, and I vaguely heard scolding. After a while, I heard the teacher's serious voice. Something happened to Thomas. Please come here. My eyes went black. Something happened to Thomas. In a hurry. I didn't have time to scan a public bicycle. I took a taxi and rushed to the primary school. In the taxi, I picked at my fingers, trying my best to calm down. In my memory, as the villain, Thomas was withdrawn and had no friends. When he grew up, he became twisted and gloomy and resorted to any means to achieve his career. In the plot, his childhood experiences were briefly described and just mentioned as miserable. But now, all this was really happening. Here we are. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, the driver in front reminded me. I came back to my senses and saw that we had already arrived at the primary school. I got out of the car, paid for the ride on my phone, and walked towards Thomas's class. It was the time of dismissal, and everyone was watching the commotion. There were crowds outside the teacher's office at the end of the classroom, and they were all talking. Is it true that Thomas stole Huey's money? It must be true. He's so poor and only eats steamed buns every day. I heard it was a lot of money. No wonder Huey's mother came to the school to make a scene. I frowned and was about to push through the crowd and go into the office. When I looked up, I saw Thomas standing in the corner with an indifferent expression. Unlike when he was in front of me, the young boy was like a porcupine, with cold eyes. But the first thing I noticed was the slap mark on his face, and my steps suddenly stopped. Half of his face was almost swollen, and his black hair seemed to have been pulled hard. It was as messy as a chicken coop, and there were some broken hairs scattered on the ground. A familiar shrill voice sounded in the air. "You're such a disgrace. Quickly take out the money and return it to your classmate." I followed the voice with my eyes and saw my aunt who had just tried to abandon Thomas not long ago. At this moment, the woman pushed Thomas in disgust and cursed. "I'm really unlucky to have you two siblings. The sister is heartless, and the brother is a thief. Why bother studying? Just drop out of school." Thomas staggered and almost fell. His eyes were like they were covered in a shadow, but he didn't say a word. The other classmates were all watching the scene. Not far away, a woman dressed in a capable way stood next to a little boy. Presumably, she was Huey's mother, and she was also watching the scene with cold eyes. Seeing that Thomas didn't respond, my aunt's eyes twitched. A fierce look crossed her well-maintained face, and she raised her hand. Thomas didn't even move his eyelids and just stood there. Anyway, this wasn't the first time, but just as the slap was about to land, a voice suddenly sounded. "Auntie." I walked in quickly and instinctively stood in front of Thomas, meeting my angry eyes. My aunt was stunned for a moment, then sneered. She crossed her arms and looked at me up and down, disdainfully saying, "It hasn't been long, and you've raised your brother to be a thief. You can sell yourself if you want, but you've led your brother astray too." As soon as these words came out, all kinds of looks fell on me. Some were suspicious, some were confused, and some were contemptuous. The teacher's face changed. The bullet comments spammed the screen. "Damn, this aunt is so vicious. She's spreading rumors about her niece in public. No wonder the villain will kill her first." I thought the villain was ungrateful before, but now I know she really deserves it. The female lead is only 18 years old. How can she stand such abuse? Alas, it makes sense for Thomas to turn black. I was so angry that my whole body was shaking, but before I could scold back, there was a scream. My aunt was pushed hard and hit the corner of the table with her waist. She grimaced in pain. I instinctively turned around. In the corner, Thomas's eyes were red, as if he had suppressed a lot of resentment. Suddenly, he stared at the twisted woman and said word by word, "It doesn't matter how you treat me, but I won't allow you to speak of my sister like that." His voice wasn't very loud, but it carried weight. But I could hear the grievance in his voice, and my eyes suddenly felt sour. What kind of life did he live in my aunt's house during the days when I lived in the school dormitory? Thinking of this, I regretted it for the first time. In the past few years, I was immersed in the pain of my parents' death and didn't care enough about this younger brother. My aunt was so angry after being pushed that she raised her hand to hit again. I grabbed her wrist and shook it off, saying coldly, "You took my parents' inheritance and treated us like this. Auntie, aren't you afraid that my parents will come back from the underworld to settle the score with you?" Meeting my gaze, Violet dodged my eyes. When my parents were still alive, Thomas and I lived a relatively wealthy life. At that time, we had a nanny, and we didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Until I was 15 and my brother was 7. My parents suddenly left, and the family property fell into Violet's hands. That was the beginning of our suffering. I didn't bother to care before because she did take care of us. But it didn't mean I was weak and wouldn't fight back if she bullied us. Violet snorted and left a sentence. I don't care about you. Just die outside as soon as possible. After saying that, she pushed through the crowd with her bag and left resentfully. I pulled Thomas and then asked him, what exactly happened? Hearing this, Thomas raised his eyes. The blood in his eyes hadn't faded, and his voice was a bit stuffy when he said, I didn't steal his money. He asked me to do his homework and gave me money. As soon as these words came out, the little boy who had been watching the show on the other side turned pale. He retorted urgently, I didn't. You're talking nonsense. The handwriting on the homework is clearly mine. Thomas stared at him for a second, then turned to look at the teacher and said coldly, I imitated his handwriting. If you don't believe it, teacher, ask him to do the homework again and see if the answers are the same. Now it was clear what was going on. The veins on the teacher's forehead twitched. You can't help others with their homework. Go back and write an 800-word self-criticism. Then the teacher looked at Hiwei's mother. MS. Do you want Hiwei to do the homework again? Hiwei's mother's face was as red as if she had been slapped. She grabbed her son's ear and walked out. Let's go home. I said why you said your homework was done when you came home recently. You asked your classmate to do it for you and even framed your classmate. Mom. It hurts. The farce came to an end. When I took Thomas out of the school, my tense nerves finally relaxed. It happened to be the time when the sun had set, and the last bit of daylight was swallowed up. Darkness enveloped the world, but not far away. The streetlights started to turn on one by one. Thomas remained silent. The streetlights slowly lengthened our shadows. I pursed my lips and asked gently, Does your face still hurt? It doesn't hurt. You're still young. There's no rush to earn money. I dryly persuaded him. Even though life was hard, I was still here. There was a long silence in response. Just when I thought Thomas wouldn't answer, he suddenly said, But I want to. Me. I stopped and looked down at him, just meeting his dark eyes. Perhaps it was his different experiences from others that made him mature too early, compared with his peers. He was so sensible that it made people feel sorry for him. The night wind carried his soft but firm voice into my ears. I want to fulfill my sister's wishes as soon as possible. The bullet comments on the screen frantically scrolled after these words. Why does my younger brother want to kill me? Why is your younger brother so different from mine? The villain seems kind of cute. Help. I have to coax my younger brother for food. Me. Woo-woo. After that day, the relationship between me and Thomas became even better. At first, he was silent like a saw-mouthed gourd. But now when he saw me coming home, his eyes would light up, and he would calmly call me sister, even to avoid washing so many dishes. He took the initiative to take on the task of cooking. Although I was 8 years older than him, I wasn't ashamed at all. I said seriously, Brother, the men in our family should be proficient in playing the piano, chess, calligraphy, painting, steaming, frying, boiling, and washing clothes. Only in this way can you marry a girl in the future. Although I knew that he would have a bad end when competing with the male lead for the female lead. But what if he was so excellent that the female lead chose him, and he became the male lead? I thought happily. Thomas glanced at me and then said to me, Move your feet. I'm going to mop the floor. I jumped to the other side. Oh, not bad. Taking the initiative to do housework is also a plus. This kind of life continued until my senior year of university. Thomas was in the second year of junior high school. He participated in a math competition, won a gold medal, and was admitted to the junior class of University A. I was truly happy for him. After finishing my internship, I took a taxi to his school without stopping, ready to pick him up and celebrate. But maybe it was because I stayed up all night making a plan yesterday. As soon as I got in the car, I felt a little tired. When I was woken up, I was still in a daze. How did an hour pass so quickly? Just as I was about to push the car door and get out, I suddenly felt something flowing out of my nose. I casually wiped it, but when I saw the blood on my fingertips, I was stunned. But after being shocked for a few minutes, I calmly took out a tissue to wipe the blood and even touched up my makeup. Probably it was because the weather was too dry. After throwing away the blood-stained tissue, I walked towards the school gate. Thomas was already waiting for me there. When he saw me from a distance, the young boy's eyes lit up. After a few years, he had grown a lot. His eyebrows and eyes had the greenness of a young man, just standing there. He was so attractive that people couldn't take their eyes off him. Ah, I've changed my view of the villain. It's a pity that the sister won't be able to enjoy the wealth. Stop. Don't say that. I want to see the warm relationship between the sister and the brother. Alas. No wonder. With such a good sister, won't the villain go crazy after she's gone? I scanned the bullet comments, and a chill suddenly welled up in my heart. Yeah, I almost forgot. In the original book, I was just an unimportant supporting character and only lived in Thomas's childhood memories. Sister. Thomas noticed that something was wrong with my face and held my cold hand, trying to transfer his warmth to me. I didn't respond. It was like a strong wind blowing through my mind, and my reason was in turmoil. But slowly, I came back to my senses. Everyone will die sooner or later. What was there to worry about? I suppressed my fear of death and forced a relaxed smile. I'm fine. Let's go home. Thomas's eyes flickered. And finally, he lowered his eyelids and agreed. After dinner, we went back to our rooms. I calculated the money I had saved over the years. Although I said that life and death were determined by fate, I made an appointment with a doctor immediately. Hey, even if there was really something wrong with me, it would be okay to treat it early. But when I came back from the hospital, that thought disappeared completely. Thomas had already cooked the meal and was sitting on the sofa waiting for me. When he saw me come in, he put down the book and walked towards me. His tone was a bit heavy. Sister, you look so pale. After going through puberty, his voice had a bit more magnetism. I didn't know what to say for a moment. But then I joked. I've been working like a beast all day. Of course. I don't look good. Let me see what delicious food you've made. He was on summer vacation now. When the new semester started, he could go to the junior class of University A. If I told him, not only would he not be able to help, but he might even stop going to school. My thoughts were in a mess. And in the end, I had my meal as usual. But I wasn't sure if it was just my imagination. Thomas's eyes darkened, and he didn't say a word for the whole night. The corners of his eyes were faintly red. During the summer vacation, to celebrate his admission, I took him to an amusement park. I didn't dare to play the really thrilling rides. I recommended the carousel to Thomas. Brother, this is really fun. Thomas glanced at the childish carousel, and the disdain in his eyes almost overflowed. I didn't really want to play with him either. I was about to go and ride it by myself. But the next moment, the young boy followed me and handed his ticket to the ticket inspector. When I saw this, I looked at him in surprise. Thomas's side profile was cold, and he pretended to be calm as he replied, I also think it's fun. Me? Who are you trying to fool? But it was still nice to have someone to play with. We played a lot of rides together. We were exhausted until we slowly walked out of the amusement park. The sun was setting, casting a golden afterglow on the ground. I turned my head and asked with a smile, "Were you happy today?" When he heard this, Thomas's eyes moved slightly, and my figure was reflected in his eyes. After a long while, he replied in a low voice, "Yes, that's good." I exhaled. If one day I really wasn't here anymore, it wouldn't be good if he had never had a good time at the amusement park. Woo-woo. No. The female lead is so nice. Don't die. Who made the villain not have money? He can't save his sister. The sister is so kind. She still remembers that her brother wanted to go to the amusement park before. Woo-woo. I glanced at the bullet comments. Thomas is my younger brother. Of course. I remember. During the following vacation, I went to work as usual and prepared the things he needed for school. Until the summer vacation ended, I sent him to the airport. Through the crowded crowd, Thomas looked at me quietly, as if some emotions were about to burst out, but he held back. I waved at him and didn't care too much. Anyway, I still had several years to live. Maybe if I was lucky, I could wait for him to come back and save me when he had money. Thomas was away for 3 years. At first, I just felt a little uncomfortable. Later, my head hurt terribly. Sometimes, when I fell asleep, I would wake up after a whole day and night. I also had nosebleeds more and more frequently. Thomas always called me and had video calls. He said he had created a project and had started making money. I forced myself to cheer up. My luxurious villa, clothes, bags, and Michelin-starred meals. With this thought in mind, I was admitted to the hospital to slow down the passage of my life. Maybe because I couldn't see Thomas. I couldn't see the bullet comments either. But if it went according to the plot, he should have met the female lead Jocelyn by now. If he really liked Jocelyn, I hoped he could get what he wanted. As for the male lead Victor, our positions were different. I couldn't care that much. Just as this thought fell, there were footsteps outside the door, and my attending doctor walked in. Dr. Bruce was an old director who specialized in treating brain diseases, but he found my situation very difficult to deal with, where the symptoms were very serious when they appeared. But I didn't die. Miss Selena, your illness can't be delayed. If you don't have the surgery, please consider whether you want to have the surgery or not. Dr. Bruce's voice was steady, but his brows were furrowed. My fingertips unconsciously dug into my palm, and the slight pain made me more awake. The probability of the surgery being successful was very small, but if I didn't have the surgery, I wouldn't have many days left to live. Just as I was hesitating, my phone rang. It was Thomas calling. I casually answered it, and I heard Thomas's voice, a little anxious. "Sister, I've found a very good doctor. He can definitely cure you. I'll be there in a few days. Just wait for me." My heart shook. At this moment, I didn't care how he knew. My eyelashes trembled, and I said, "Okay." 2 days passed in a flash. When Thomas landed, I was sitting in the hospital room watching TV. In fact, my vision was already a bit blurred. I could only vaguely see some shadows. When I heard the door of the hospital room open, I instinctively thought it was Thomas coming back. But before I could call him brother, a hand suddenly covered my mouth. I didn't know what I inhaled, and my eyes went black, and my consciousness disappeared. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on a big bed. The room was luxuriously decorated. Presumably, it was in a villa. But what was going on? "Are you awake? Ask your brother to hand over the person, and I'll let you go." A deep and cold voice came from not far away. I looked in the direction of the voice. Strangely, my spirit was very good at this time. I could even see the person in front of me clearly. The man's eyes were sharp, and his facial features were well defined. It was a very handsome face. At this time, the bullet comments appeared again. Oh my God. What is the male lead doing? Why did he kidnap the villain's sister? This is so bad. The villain's sister's state doesn't look right at all. How could someone who has been lying down for many days suddenly be in such good spirits? Because Thomas used Jocelyn to force Jocelyn's very powerful uncle to operate on his sister. Now that Victor can't find Jocelyn, of course, he has to solve the problem from the source. But if the villain's sister dies in the male lead's hands, the two of them will become sworn enemies. This damned sense of fate. It's like going back to the starting point. I stared at the bullet comments, and my heart felt cold. But Victor didn't know. Seeing that I was in a good state, he coldly ordered, "Call him." He handed me the phone. I took it, and I couldn't help but say to him, "Mr. Victor, to be honest, why don't you send me back now? If I die here, be careful that the value of your house will depreciate." Victor squinted his eyes slightly. I looked at him directly, not backing down. Making this call might lead to irreparable consequences. His thin lips parted slightly, and he repeated, "Make the call." I let out a sigh and dialed Thomas's number. Almost instantly, the other side answered. Thomas's voice was trembling. "Selena, where are you? I've brought a doctor back. The surgery can be done right away." This was the first time he called me by my full name. Obviously, he was very anxious. I glanced at Victor. My strength was fading away, but my tone was extremely calm. I went to relax. "Thomas, listen to your sister. My illness can't be cured. I don't want to die in a terrible way. If you have a heart, burn a villa, clothes, and bags for me after I die." Even without Victor's actions, I couldn't get off the operating table. This was for the best. I didn't have to see Thomas for the last time. I was stunned. Then he stood up quickly and shouted outside, "Doctor, my sister is awake." But when he brought the person in, I fainted again. Thomas widened his eyes. The doctor patted him on the shoulder and showed pity in his eyes. It's normal to have hallucinations occasionally. But Thomas didn't believe it. He insisted that the doctor examine me. The doctor had no choice but to examine me. After the examination, he was suddenly surprised. "It seems that there are signs of waking up. What did you say to the patient?" The stimulation was so great. Thomas was too excited to hide it. But thinking of what he said, he smiled bitterly. "It's nothing." He just said it casually. In the evening, I woke up again. Thomas was still staring at me closely, as if he was afraid of missing my waking up. Unexpectedly, our eyes met. I wanted to speak, but when I opened my mouth, my voice was very hoarse. "Drink some water first." Seeing this, he quickly handed me the water. I drank some water but still didn't speak. I just looked at him. But wasn't I dead? Meeting my confused eyes, his eyes darkened, and the emotions he had accumulated for a long time suddenly burst out. "Do you know that you almost scared me to death?" "Of course. I knew. You even went crazy." Seeing that I didn't say anything, Thomas turned his face away and refused to look at me. But after a while, he raised his hand and wiped his eyes randomly. Was he crying? My heart ached. I wanted to touch his head, but I didn't have the strength after lying down for so long. So I said in a hoarse voice, "Don't cry. I'm fine, aren't I?" I glanced at the calendar placed beside me and felt a little guilty. Sigh. A year had passed. I had rehabilitation for a long time. It was half a year later when I was discharged from the hospital. Thomas came to pick me up from the hospital in person. Thanks to the professional nurse he hired for me after he became rich, there wasn't much damage to my body. Later, I learned from him. On the day Victor took me away, he had made preparations in advance, afraid that I would die there. His family was in the medical industry. There was a top-notch hospital near the villa. After emergency treatment, when Thomas came with the doctor, the surgery was performed. The surgery was successful, but I slept for a year before waking up. During this year, Thomas's project started, and he became a new upstart in the business world. He didn't get along well with Victor. Suddenly, I thought of an important person. Brother, do you like someone? I glanced at Thomas, who came to pick me up, and couldn't help asking. When he heard this, Thomas seemed to see what I was thinking. The tips of his ears turned red, and he said honestly, "Yes, it's Jocelyn." "Ah, did you catch up with her?" I asked carefully, but this time, before he could answer, a girl with outstanding looks came from the other side. She was tall, with fair skin and delicate and bright facial features. She was likable at first sight. "Is this your sister?" The corners of her lips curved, and she walked towards us. Thomas nodded slightly, and his eyes softened. "Yes, this is my sister, Selena." I looked at the well-matched two and couldn't believe it. No way. Were they really together? The long-lost bullet comments appeared again. "Ha ha ha. The female lead has been in a coma for too long and doesn't know. The younger brother fought for it. He's really amazing." That's right. I used to think the male lead and the female lead were a good match. But the male lead is older after all. The younger brother is better. But the male lead has a good family background and likes the female lead. How is he not better than the villain? Really, the female lead has no taste. LOL. If it wasn't for Selena's good luck, the male lead's actions would have sent Selena away. The female lead is willing to help the villain. Okay. She was going to die anyway. What does it have to do with the male lead? I have to say, the villain was really well raised by his sister. He can do everything. I quickly glanced at them. Listen, it's not that I'm lazy. It's to exercise him better. But when it came to Victor, my eyes moved slightly. In fact, because of different positions, there was no way to say who was right and who was wrong. The person he held dear was missing. So naturally, Thomas had to pay the price. Moreover, he had prepared emergency doctors. So he wasn't completely insane. Thinking like this, I didn't care too much. After getting in the car, Thomas and I first sent Jocelyn back, and then we went home together. After more than half an hour, the car stopped outside a luxurious villa. Thomas got out of the car and stood beside me, with a hint of a smile in his eyes. "Go in and take a look." Me? Oh, although I knew that Thomas had money now, but he was really rich. We went into the house together. As soon as we walked into the living room, there were bags of various brands in sight. There were clothes, bags, and all kinds of luxury jewelry. "Do you like them?" He turned his head and took out a yellowed piece of paper from his suit jacket, carefully checking if there was anything missing. I saw at a glance that it was what I had casually said back then. And now, those words were being fulfilled one by one. My heart felt warm. But soon, I thought of another thing. I pulled my gaze away from these things, looked around, and couldn't find a suitable item. So I asked fiercely, "Did you earn the money through proper channels?" I hadn't forgotten. When he heard this, Thomas looked at me innocently. Of course. After our parents died in a car accident, my younger brother and I were fostered in my aunt's house. Was he just teasing me? "You little guy. You have a bit of filial piety, but not much." The next moment, Thomas, who was driven out by me, I turned around and looked at the huge villa. I'm going to just relax. The end.